Hey everybody, Smart Silver Stacker here. I'm joined today by CEO of Wealth Research Group, Lior Gantz, and very excited to speak with Lior about the resource sector and where gold and silver are headed from here. So hello, Lior, welcome to the channel. Glad to have you back.
Thank you. Good to be back.
Before we dig into the resource sector, I just want to say that it's really good to speak with you. When I saw the news of what was going on October 7th with the terrorist attack there in Israel, you were one of the first people that came to mind. So it's good to see you appear to be in one piece and good health. And just tell us what's the situation like on the ground there? How are you weathering the storm?
Um, we're already on November 10th doing this interview. On October 7th itself, and the 3-4 days after that, it was really bad. Um, in fact, on October 7th, if Hezbollah in the north would have started to attack, uh, we would have been fighting, I would say, existential war. It would have been um, something that would have sparked regional war. So it's a good thing that they chose not to. It shows you that they're not ready for a regional war, which is that's pretty good. Um, so because nobody wants war, right? Except for terrorists. So uh, those were the first few days. We really got our act together. It was so out of nowhere uh, for um, for the higher ups in our country, for the intelligence and everyone else, and even within the Hamas terrorist movement, even the militants within the movement did not know a lot about the attack until the morning of. That's how they managed to keep it a secret even from their own people. Um, that's part of the reason it was so successful from their side of it. Um, because of it, because of the scope of this, our government is justifiably looking to change the entire equation of our borders. So we are in the middle of an operation right now, a war in Gaza, which would end with the Gaza Strip being demilitarized, and then I'm sure we will pull it to our interests, the UN to their interests, the Arab countries to their interests, and the United States and China to their interest, and something will have to appear on the day after for um, you know for over 2 million people that live in Gaza Strip. 65 to 70% of them voted for Hamas, so uh, it would have to be something that uh, will not allow Hamas movement to reappear, because clearly 1.4 million people want this culture. Um, so we have a problem, and therefore, I don't want to speak about the day after because I don't know how it will look like, but there will need to be something drastic done in order to make sure that that culture of ISIS does not exist on the border, and it will not. So this will not end with anything else. And then there's the northern front, and I assume that is going to be a bit longer, but that will be that will need to be secured as well. The Hezbollah is a terrorist organization that is far more important to the head of the octopus with all these proxies, which is Iran, because they're the same faction of Islam. They're both Shiite, so they care about Hezbollah way more than they do about Hamas, and it's their baby, so to speak. And they are very strong in terms of their military size. They're the size of a Western country, so that will need to be dealt with. I think we are in the process of uh, a year to 2 year war, which will end by Israel securing its future for the next 100 years. And hopefully, the crown jewel of the whole thing will be normalization with Saudi Arabia, which would be incredible. No matter who's in power in the United States, be it Biden for 4 more years, or if the Republicans win, the importance of normalizing relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia cannot be understated. It cannot be overstated. It's the country that has the two most sacred sites to the Islam, Mecca and Medina, on Saudi Arabia, with the holiest city to two of the religions, to certainly for the Jewish people, that is our city, and for Christians for their reasons, and for Muslims because they invented that it's important to them, and creating that normalization just from the perspective of the prosperity that it can bring to the Middle East and the peace that it can bring to the Middle East is substantial. And then from commerce and trade, it would lift the entire Middle East to great heights. It will actually make Israel one of the most important countries in the world. So believe you me, we do not lose sight of that price.
Well, as you say, hopefully a broader regional conflict can be avoided. It seems like perhaps the normalization process between Israel and Saudi Arabia could have possibly been something that led to this conflict. What do you think about that?
Sure. So first of all, let's look at the pros and cons. Obama, worst president in U.S. history for the Middle East. Just somebody that has no idea what the Middle East is, and did a lot of damage. Then Trump comes in, and he understands the Middle East. He appoints Jared Kushner to the issue of the Middle East, and Jared Kushner comes in without any prejudice, any biases, any racist thoughts, or anything else, and just asks all the Arab countries, what's important to you? How do you view the world? Not trying to Americanize the Middle East, but trying to solve problems with the leverage that the Americans can bring to the table. And he did a marvelous job with the Abraham Accords. And up until the pandemic, Trump was in the lead to have 4 more years. So if that would have happened, I think that Trump would have gotten the Saudis to come to the table and normalize, and he would have gotten the Nobel Peace Prize, and he would have been remembered as the most important U.S. president ever, because that's the crown jewel. I have to again state this: Saudi Arabia and Israel. If we are able to create a recognition between the two, it's one of the most important days. You know, it's like the Magna Carta. It's like the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. These are like, you know, once in 200-300 year events, and for this is a once in a 14 centuries event. So it's really important. But Biden wins the elections, and he because of the way he is, he doesn't want to just add the Saudis to the Abraham Accords, because that will give credit to Trump, and he tries to frame it in his own version of it by creating the economic framework, the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, the IPEF for short, and it's basically how you connect the India with Saudi Arabia, with Jordan, with Israel, and into Europe. It's a phenomenal economic framework that will basically render the Belt and Road Initiative by the Chinese useless. So it's, you know, that's how you see what's forming here. America was on the verge of doing something huge. Israel was on the verge of doing something huge, and Iran had to stop this, because it would have marginalized their entire agenda into nothingness. And Hamas saw that if this happens, the Palestinian issue would become, you know, something that nobody cares about anymore. And this was like, it's now or never. We have to make everyone look at us again. And so that's what they did. So absolutely, 100%, as you say, this was to sabotage Saudi-Israeli normalization, and there's other players involved. So obviously for Russia, this was good because it diverts budgets away from the Ukraine. For China, it was good because this puts the USS Gerald Ford in the Mediterranean instead of, or in the Red Sea instead of in the South China Sea. So all of these countries have a vested interest in America, staying put and not diverting everything and all its resources to just two fronts, but now to three fronts. And just so so you understand like where this is leading towards. In the end, we have the end of globalization. That's 100% already the case. We're not in a globalized world anymore. And what we're seeing is that we're deglobalizing and creating what's called trust-based globalization. You only deal with countries that you 100% can trust on, because otherwise you get what Putin did to Europe, where you can cut off the oil and natural gas, just a 30-year arrangement, just done. So you don't want that. You don't want to depend on other countries, like China did with this zero COVID policies. That's basically economic war against other countries. So you don't want that. You want to just trust. You want to work with countries that you trust, and that's the world we're moving into.
Yeah, and all parties seeming to have some deglobalization on the agenda, such as the destruction of the Nordstream 2 pipeline. So it seems to be a game that all sides perhaps are playing. Of course, no one knows for sure who did that, but it seems like the U.S. may have had a hand in that.
And what? I'm sorry, in Nordstream.
The destruction of the Nordstream 2 pipeline. What do you think about that? Who do you think was responsible?
In my experience, if there's no damning evidence, in other words, no footage, no anything else, then the U.S. does have something involved with it. Probably not directly, but or maybe directly, but not officially. In other words, through black ops or anything that they can just say, we don't know who these people are. But if it was Russia, you'd have a lot of trails, and this would be all over the media. When it's the other way around, that there's normally very little to show.
Just a big question mark.
Look, I watched Elon Musk on a podcast just a couple of days ago, and the podcaster asked him like, war, this, that, and he basically said, look, the West isn't perfect, the East isn't perfect. When you think about the world, you have to just pick who's more normal, and that's at the end of the day the choice that somebody has to make. Like, what is more normal? Because no one's perfect, and governments on everywhere in the world, governments do things that they probably shouldn't do. But at the end of the day, you have to pick who's doing it out of hate and who's doing it more out of necessity, etc. So, and where life is respected more, or values of life and liberty and everything else.
That's a good way to look at it, I think. So moving on from the geopolitical arena, let's get into resources, gold, silver, commodities. From 2000 to 2011, gold and silver put on a very solid run. However, after that 2011 peak, we have seen the various other assets, large bubbles inflated in stocks, crypto, real estate. Gold and silver have underperformed since that peak. What do you think we're going to see moving forward? Do you think there's a possibility that trend may change in the future?
I do, but not for the same reasons of the 2000s. In the 2000s, what mostly drove the price of of gold and silver higher is the fact that the United States just did not have a real plan for China, and therefore it fed that beast and grew it into a threat. And in the process, China consumed a lot of commodities, and that drove the price of commodities higher, alongside slashing interest rates in America by Greenspan throughout that decade, which created some sort of an inflationary world, not hyperinflation or anything like that, but the inflation was higher, way higher than after the Grand Financial Crisis. So in 2011, with Fukushima, and then with the realization that the deflationary forces within the United States and abroad were strong, then we just didn't have inflation for many, many years. And that drove commodity prices down hard. In December 2015, the Fed realized that they're a bit too late on inflation and started raising rates. They weren't that late, but the market did think that they were late, and therefore, when they started to raise rates, we saw a phenomenal spike in both gold and silver in 2016. But it was I call it a false out, a false breakout, basically, because the inflation scenario didn't change that much. In 2018, in September 2018, gold and silver bottomed for the cycle, and in April 2019, gold became a tier 1 asset. That was when gold was $1,291 an ounce. So from that point on, gold started to rally, and of course, when the pandemic hit, it got slashed. But otherwise, it was already at around 1,800. And it got slashed back down to 1,200, and now it's back to 2,000s for the third time, or roughly 2,000 for the third time. And silver is at 23.24. The world that we are moving into, where you have dependencies that have been around for 20, 30 years falling apart, means that the United States needs to onshore a lot of industrialization back, and I mean a lot. Now, because of the shale revolution, America has everything it needs in-house to become an industrial a powerhouse in the fourth industrial revolution. So America looks great. China is dealing with a lot of problems with real estate, but it also has a lot of upside with many industries. And I think that what's interesting about both of these countries is that China has been around for thousands of years, and for the most part, they've not been colonizers or invaders. They very much looked within to just become very strong as a country. You can see that by the famous Great China Wall. The United States, after World War II, it could have basically said, "Okay, let's go. We can take over the entire world," and they didn't as well. So you have two empires that don't have imperial, they're not empires, they're just large superpowers, but they don't have imperial aspirations. That's really interesting, the world that we're moving into. So I see a world of two blocks: the United States and the allies it trusts, and China and the allies that it trusts. And because that situation, the reserve currency role will remain with the United States, but it will be harder for it to fund its national debt with very low interest rates. And when you create a world with 4 or 5% interest rates, inflation has to run around 3 to 4 to 5% as well. And if you take just the next decade, so between 2023 and 2030, at 4 or 5% inflation, you're losing about 25% of your savings power in real terms. That's a lot of money. That's enough to send gold to 3,000 or 4,000, and it's enough to send silver to between 60 and 100. So I do see a lot of future for gold and silver. in the immediate term, in other words, in the next, let's say, year until the elections, I think the gold and silver will probably trade in a range. Gold may rise over 2100 and do hit an all-time high, but I don't think it's the real breakout that everyone wishes for yet. I think that in May or June, when the Fed starts to cut rates, then we'll see how explosive this rally really is. And if it starts to rally towards the 2300, then we're talking. So I do think that in the gold and silver will trade in a range until May or June. When the Fed starts to cut, we'll know the real nature of this bull market for gold and silver. But for sure, commodities look really well right now in the world that we're moving into.
So you think that that will be the critical turning point for the precious metals, will be a reversal
Yes.
of Fed policy?
Yes. Yes, I do. That along with in the next few months, I think that unemployment will rise above 4%. And in an election year, it will create a lot of pressure on the Fed, and the market will see through that. Gold traders will see through that, so they'll start to extrapolate forward, and that will drive prices higher. You know, in a very inverse manner, a weaker economy will create higher prices for the markets and for gold and silver.
So a stagflationary environment, is that what you envision?
Um,
High
I
inflation,
would
but
say,
weak economic growth?
look, inflation is coming down, so I don't think high inflation, but certainly higher than trend, higher than the 2%. But we're not in a stagflation at all. The country, the United States, has the next decade here. You're going to see so many new millionaires everywhere in the United States. There are going to be millionaires from the real estate industry. There are going to be millionaires from industry. The boom that's coming to the United States, most Americans don't even realize. But the boom is amazing. There's so much happening right now in the United States because of the high interest, really high interest rate environment. You're not sensing it yet, but once the restrictive policy just goes back to normal and the banks start lending, man, you're going to see economic boom from everywhere you look. So you better be ready. Don't tuck your money in money market accounts. This is the time to be very aggressive with investing in the future of the United States.
Well, that's good to hear. It's always nice to get an optimistic viewpoint. I think we can tend to be a little doom and gloom here in this sector.
There is no year. There is no year since 1776, and certainly not since 1890, when the United States became de facto the world's biggest economy, where I was not bullish on the United States. There's just no other country in the world that has so much. It's almost like God touched you guys. You have everything. You have friendly neighbors on the north and the south. You have two of the greatest barriers from any threat on the east and on the west. You have two oceans that, with no islands that threaten you, which is exactly what threatens China. So no straits or choke points or anything that anybody can ever threaten to you. And when Germany or the Soviet Union tried to do it with Cuba, you crushed it immediately. When the Japanese tried to do it, and almost reached the shores of San Francisco and Seattle, you took actions on that. There's literally no threat. Then when you look within, you have more arable land than all other countries combined. You have the Mississippi River and its extensions, which is the greatest natural transport system in the world, far cheaper than anything else. I mean, where should I even stop? You have all the talent. Everyone wants to do business with the country with the best rule of law and the best enterprise system. It's the golden goose that keep laying eggs. It's a matter of understanding that and aligning with it. And I mean, where else in what other country do 30% of people go from rags to rags to riches like 3 times in their life? The opportunities are everywhere.
Well, yeah, for all the problems that the United States may have, I do think it's still one of the best places in the world to live,
The
and
best
there
place.
are opportunities certainly for those who are willing to capitalize on them. Now, let me ask you this. We just saw the interest on the U.S. national debt exceed $1 trillion.
Yeah,
We've got some massive deficit spending going on. Last
yeah,
quarter, deficit to the tune of $1 trillion. We've been told by the Treasury that this quarter and next, they'll be borrowing another 1.5 trillion. Now, I know that you anticipate the Fed cutting rates sometime early next year, maybe Q2 of next year. In the past, when we've discussed this, you have told me that you do not see a return to debt monetization or QE. Do you still believe that to be the case, or do you think that
absolutely.
there will be a need to bring interest rates down and the Fed will buy some debt? What are your thoughts on that?
The Fed will not buy that though. The Fed will keep selling debt. We're not going back to QE in this generation. This generation has just been through almost hyperinflation in America in 2021. The Fed will not go back to QE. They will loosen interest rates because interest rates are just they're too high. But they wanted to wait at these very restrictive levels until the jobs market came into balance, and because Biden opened the border, uh, millions of people come in and join the workforce. Take it, you have the good and bad with that. Um, but immigration is what built America. You need immigration because you keep growing. You're just a machine that keeps growing and creating more wealth for everyone. So I wish you'd have a more conservative president that doesn't open the border for everyone. But um, we can debate immigration policy all we want. At the end of the day, now your jobs market is much more aligned, and I think that this gives the Fed the ability to start cutting rates back down. With regards to the national debt, what was the specific question?
Well, it seems to be rising at a rapid pace, and we have
Unprecedented
interest.
rates.
Yes. So,
Yeah,
do you think that the debt will continue to expand the way it has been,
absolutely. Yeah.
and what effect will that have on the markets?
Um, look, Japan has a 200% GDP ratio, and they have very little inflation. The United States has the reserve currency role, and I think a 102, 103% debt to GDP ratio. Even though it's no fun for anyone to be in this situation. There's 15 countries with worst economies that have higher debt to GDP ratios with no severe inflation. I think that uh, the United States will keep running giant deficits, and in the end, um, it's going to play a role. But the worst thing is that the Democrats and the Republicans can't formulate a plan. If there was any plan at all, cut the deficit by 1% every year for the next century. If that was the case, then the dollar would be much stronger. Any plan. The fact that there is no plan is the real problem. And I think that also Trump did a little damage when he started to talk about maybe we shouldn't pay like the Chinese what we owe them or something like that. Like weaponizing the reserve currency status is not the right way to go. So I think that you need to keep paying your debts, honoring everyone that has lent you money, and I think that the Dems and the Republicans have to have some sort of a real leader that says, "Hey, let's cut out all this. We're one country. We've been given the greatest two documents in the world, the Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights. Let's not screw this, and um, and let's get our act together and formulate a plan. How do we balance taxes with our expenses so that we can start balancing the books, even if it takes us 100 years? But let's do it." And I think that that's what everyone in the world wants to see from the United States. A little bit less division.
The partisanship certainly does seem to contribute to the problem of spending. Just the, as you say, the inability to come together on anything. It seems like whoever's in power, they want to keep, spending indefinitely, and then whoever is on the sideline wants to criticize that until someone from their party's in, and then it's back to the spending fest.
Mhm.
So that's a fairly optimistic outlook, I think, for where we're headed, but a lot of merit to what you're saying there. Uh, However, let's bring this back to where we started the conversation. In
Okay.
the event that we see a increase in global conflict, whether that
Hmm.
be an escalation in Ukraine, although it's looking like maybe that conflict is going to
Stalemating.
wind itself up, wrap itself up here. Nobody has
Um,
a crystal ball.
not wrap itself up, but certainly it's in the stalemate.
Yes, and in the Middle East, there is the possibility of a broader regional war. Certainly in Asia, there is the possibility for conflict as well. What effect would a increase in global conflict have on your optimistic forecast for the United States economy?
So I think right now we're in the most dangerous spot because um, look what happened in the last 2 years. Russia, which the entire continent of Europe depended on for energy, cut itself off. Then, if you look at the Middle East, the Straits of Hormuz and Bab el-Mandeb, which are two choke points where a third of global commerce goes through, are controlled by Iran, and on the other side, they're controlled by the Houthis in Yemen, they're threatened by Iran and threatened by the Houthis, which are a proxy of Iran. As more countries become independent from globalization and have and can write their ticket energy-wise and in all other respects, in other words, in the next 2, 3 years, we're going to create a very safe world where Russia, if you don't like, if you don't like Europe, just don't do business with Europe. They're going to buy their national. They have other sources. So I think that as we deconstruct globalization, but create the new world, that will create a very safe path forward, because you have two superpowers that are not imperialistic, and that can actually be one of the best um, positions for the world. Two superpowers, none of them really at uh, looking to conquer uh, the other one, but just looking for the other one not to overstep its bounds. Now, the one problem does remain Taiwan, which is ideologically to the Chinese. That's like that's mine. I need this, and I think that not until maybe President Xi dies will this change. So that does worry me. But just keep in mind that the Taiwanese have what everyone wants, which is the most cutting edge chips. If the Chinese attack Taiwan and those factories have to stop manufacturing, they will not have a military. So it will have to be resolved in some other way. It's not as simple as just, hey, we're big, we're China, you're small, you're Taiwan, we'll just eat you up. It would not be like that at all. So it's very complex. But as I said, I do think that as we deconstruct globalization and have framework for the next stage, and the next stage is less dependency between countries and more dependencies between countries that share the same values, it's a much safer world to live in.
Well, a safer world and one with less conflict, I think, will ultimately benefit everyone. So, with things moving forward the way that you have forecast here, what do you think people should be doing to position themselves to take advantage from these trends?
Keep buying American equities, meaning American stocks of the most incredible companies on the planet. Do your own research on it. If you want to see my personal portfolio, you can go to wealthresearch.com/portfolio. It's literally the companies that I've invested in, and currently increasing all the time. Buy real estate. find real estate. The opportunities in America right now are everywhere. If you understand demographic trends, if you understand the revival of the industrial base, I mean, you can become an overnight millionaire if you find the right piece of land and a company wants to build its factories on that, or the municipality wants to build a highway system through it. There's just going to be so much construction everywhere in America. So, get into real estate, even if it's your second way of income, and just understand that this is it. Like, you can change your entire fate for you, for your family, for your future, for your children, for your grandchildren. In the next 5 years, we're deconstructing globalization and opening up the world to opportunity. There's going to be opportunity everywhere. So just grab a hold of it with two hands. Don't go into these YouTube channels that tell you that you'll wake up tomorrow and the dollar will be gone and all that kind of stuff that I see everywhere. Don't listen to that. It's delusions. It's nothing. Just erase it from memory. There is a huge opportunity ahead of us in the next 3, 4, 5 years.
So wealthresearchgroup.com. Is there anywhere else we can direct viewers to find more of your work, Lior?
No, wealthresearchgroup.com. If you want to follow the newsletter, just sign up. It's a free newsletter. And if you want to check out some of our special reports, just go on the website, click on the special reports tab. There's a lot of free PDF downloads that you can check out. And yeah, that's it. That's the best way. Only way.
All right, Lior. Well, I appreciate you joining me today. Always great to speak with you, and we'll have to have you on the channel again sometime soon.
Please. Looking forward to it.